Good morning and welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH-FM, your home for community radio. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make New Haven tick. Aisha Woods helps make New Haven tick. She's the director of our local government city plan department. Arlevia Samuel helps make New Haven tick. She's the manager of neighborhood and commercial development for local government's Neighborhoods Anti-Blight Agency, Livable City Initiative. And Jonathan Hopkins has always made New Haven tick. He grew up here, developed an early love for urban planning and architecture, and now works as a recovering architect and city planner and the Independence comment section's influential commenter on urban designs. They're all here in the WNHH-FM studio to talk about an issue they're involved in, the quest to upgrade the rules for what you can and can't build on made commercial thoroughfares in New Haven, on Whaley and Grand Avenue and Dixwell Avenue. And thanks to Yale New Haven Hospital for providing support. Thanks for coming in, everybody. What a pleasure to have you all in the studio.
Thank you for having us.
Feel like we got the A-team. All right.
Thank you.
And now, Aisha, you're pretty new to the job, right? We've been about a year, a little more?
I've been about 6 months in this role, but I started at the city in March of 2018.
And if you don't mind coming so close to the mic, you're almost touching it. When did you come from New Haven originally, or did you move here for the job?
I've lived in New Haven for over 25 years.
Oh, you have? I'm
Yes.
sorry. Okay.
Yes.
Have we ever bumped into each other out to the woods and not said hi or something?
I know who you are.
Okay. And Arlevia, how long you been at LCI?
December will be 3 years.
All right. So this is very interesting, I think, what's going on now, because we've always heard complaints for years about how our zoning is stuck in the 1960s and 1950s, that we used to design New Haven for cars, not for people. We used to do the single-use zoning where you'd put, like, stores here, houses somewhere else, workplaces somewhere else, and that there was kind of this consensus in New Haven that we want to change that. We want mixed use stuff all together, and we want to have denser development where a lot of people are in a smaller amount of space. And so I thought that was easy, but is it not turning out to be easy, Aisha? What's going on?
Well, I think, everything you said is right. And that's the really, like, the long range thinking on this. Part of what we have is a disconnect in many cases between our comprehensive plan, which was really put together as a community process, as well as the Main Streets Initiative, with our actual zoning and what the zoning allows and doesn't allow, specifically on those corridors. So part of it is just bringing in alignment the zoning, which kind of sets the rules, with the comp plan, which is a vision.
And that vision was done, when was that completed?
So that was completed in 2015, the latest version of it. But I don't, obviously it's something that, there's been changes in the city since then. So it should be seen as something that's an evolving vision.
But did I kind of get it right? I gave the dummy version.
Absolutely.
Denser, mix the stuff all together, not for the car, for people who walk and bike and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I would add, some of the other, issues that maybe weren't, I think they were at the forefront for the Vision 2025, but perhaps have been, are more highlighted are issues like affordable housing, also climate change.
Mm-hmm.
So those are areas where we've incorporated, some additional provisions within the proposed zoning.
Okay, so then we had this
upgrades.
idea, there's where we want to go. Then we found out that the rules, and I guess one reason we care about this, right, is over and over again we make exceptions to zoning. So if you got enough money for a good lawyer and you're building a big project, you can go and get an exception. But if you're Joe Schmo or one of us, it's kind of like a real hassle. You can't even put a sign up at your synagogue. So Arlevia, how long, I guess you've been involved in this process of changing the zoning code so we kind of have an easier way to build, let's say, a store with an apartment over it and closer to the street and not needing 95 parking spaces, right?
That's correct. As a part of the Main Street Initiative, we're trying to make the commercial corridors, which is Dixwell, Whaley, and Grand Avenue, where there are more commercial businesses throughout the city.
Mm-hmm.
We need to make it where it's easier for a developer to come in and actually create what used to be there when it was viable.
That's so interesting. I always think about that. And I want to get back to specifics here, but you just said something that jogged something in my mind that I've heard Jonathan talk about, which is that So Jane Jacobs was going to throw the name out there, right? So she had the critique of urban renewal. Places like New Haven, although she thought we did some stuff right. That part's always left out of the conversation. But basically what she said is that urban renewal, they destroyed what was so great about cities. People one by one made decisions about putting their life investment to build that store with 2 apartments over it or to have stuff in different places. And then zoning kind of wrecked it all with planners and made it inhuman. But when we want to get back to Jane Jacobs, we do what Arlevia just said. We want what used to be there. So then every time we do a project in New Haven, say you got to have the store on the first floor and 2 apartments over it. Whereas some people have said Jane Jacobs had a concept which is let cities develop organically. Not that it has to be to this one size of what we lost before. Does that make sense, Jonathan? That maybe we too often try to recreate exactly what was there rather than free up an organic development space where people can do what they believe in?
Well, I mean, a truly organically developed city is kind of gone now. There's so many regulations, there's so many forces that shape development that a truly organic city, I think, is a little bit of a thing of the past. And I'm just sort of, this conversation is reminding me of, my parents talking about how there was a cheese shop on the corner of Whaley and Winthrop when they first moved to Beaver Hills neighborhood. There was a Jewish grocery, an Italian grocery. So Whaley Avenue was a much different place even just a few decades ago. And I know that Dixwell used to have lots of doctors' offices and other locally owned medical offices, and Grand Avenue was a very, very dense 3-4 story mixed-use walkable area. And a lot of that development pattern sort of developed even before zoning was ever adopted in the city, originally in 1926 and then revised in 1963. So I think that it's worth talking about how can we recreate some of that vibrancy that grew organically today, given our kind of
So I guess
larger regulatory
my
environment.
loaded question is, and any of you jump in, when we want to recreate the vibrancy, that doesn't mean that it's going to end up with the cheese shop on the corner, right? Because now people might buy cheese somewhere else, or the Jewish grocery. Well, actually, Jewish people are back in Beaver Hills in a big way, but people move different places. We have the internet now. People buy different kinds of things, and different kinds of stores are succeeding than used to before. People have different living patterns. Family sizes can be different. I guess, what is the role of the planner here? The planner wants to make sure. Now, obviously, your goal overall is to get rid of out-of-date zoning regulations so people can build. Arlevia said make it easier. In terms of what we want them to do, how much do we steer them as a planner, Aisha? And how much do we just try to make, as Arlevia said, possible that if you have an idea and you got the money behind it, you believe the market's going to support it, you can build it?
I'll jump in. I think in this current proposal, it's really more of an enabling document. So we're not saying you should have this or that. That is up for the neighborhood and the market to decide. One of the things we've struggled with is we have this antiquated use table, which specifies things.
And that's when you could look up, like, if I'm going to be on this inch of Whaley Avenue, I have to be this many feet away from the street, right?
Or if you're doing like a tannery, you can't do it in this location. I mean, it has some really interesting, outdated. But I mean, one of the biggest barriers, I think, to small scale development and to entrepreneurs wanting to open a space is some of the regulation, getting through that regulatory, those regulatory hurdles you referred to earlier. So part of this is it's not only, enabling developers to come from the outside, but we're really hoping it's a way to build equity within the neighborhoods and make it easier for small scale development to happen as well.
All right. So you're listening to 3 people right in the mix of how we're going to build our city going forward. And that's Aisha Woods, the head of city plan, Arlevia Samuel from LCI. She's about neighborhood and commercial development, and Jonathan Hopkins, who has been teaching us in the Independent for a long time about our history and where we're going next. So let's tell people what it is, because we haven't really stated what it is. It is you folks are holding lots of public hearings to pass a proposal to amend our zoning code, to bring it up to date, and to do the kind of things we talked about, as Aisha said, to make it easier. So you don't have to go for a special exception every time you want to build something that, of course, we want to build. So you can build higher buildings than we used to say. If this gets passed, you can have more. You can have less parking than there used to be, because not everybody's got a car. You got to make sure that at least 10% of what you build, if you're building housing, is if you have at least 9 units, at least 10% is affordable. That you don't have to have, as I said, as much parking as you used to, and that you allow as of right, meaning you don't have to go get a variance, you don't have to hire a lawyer. If you want to mix in a restaurant, indoor entertainment, or a store along with that housing. Does that summarize what you're asking the city to pass?
That does, but I also want to point out that there are incentives for doing deeper affordability. So this is the
Mhm.
first time there's been a baseline affordability requirement. But in order to achieve the maximal allowable density and the maximum allowable FAR, there's a series of
That's
incentives.
Florida area ratio.
Yeah, Florida area ratio.
All right, so
There-
now you
there-
guys, I'm sorry, go ahead.
There's additional incentives both for sustainability measures and for affordability measures.
So you need this passed by the Board of Alders, right?
Correct.
Anybody else?
I think we really want to end up with you know, a lot of community buy-in on this. I think this.
Well, you've
needs-
held a lot of community
Yes.
meetings. We've been there. Tom Breen has written about 100 of them that you've held. You go in each of the neighborhoods. And Arlevia, it's hard to get people out, right? I mean, people just don't go to a lot of meetings in neighborhoods, do they? I don't think we had that many people. We usually count ourselves in the crowd to make it seem like it was a bigger crowd, and we go cover these things. How do you get that maximum buy-in? Because I see how hard you're working at it.
That's true. I walk the corridors a lot.
Mhm.
So I go into the businesses. I have a great relationship with a lot of the businesses. There are very few residents you run into during the daytime outside,
Mhm.
but we get the notices out. I go meet with the CMTs, community management teams. I ask for their help, the alders to get their help, to get the community to come out to the meetings. But like you said, it's very hard to get someone to come to
And then
the
it's hard to
actual meeting.
decide who's the community. It's a little bit like in news, we have a saying, man bites dog, dog bites man. But dog bites man, that happens all the time, so nobody gets so worked up, you don't write about it. Man bites a dog, that's a good story, we're going to pay attention. So if you're going to decide, okay, we're not going to live in another century now, we're going to just upgrade some rules, that doesn't get people saying, oh, I'm not going to watch, Survivor tonight. I'm going out to the city plan meeting or the Board of Alders. But so am I right in saying that you've had a lot of meetings on this, not a huge number of people's come, and now you need the approval of the Board of Alders, and all of a sudden a whole lot of people come and said, hey, you didn't ask us, and this is some big gentrification vehicle. Isn't that kind of what happened last week? I
A
mean,
good summation of what happened.
how'd you feel about that?
I felt some type of way because I still felt that was not a proper representation of the community.
Mhm.
And I think the only way we'll get an accurate representation of the community is what was done back in 2014-15, which was by surveys, which were handed out door to door to all the residents where they actually filled out the survey.
Who did those
Be-
surveys? Did you do that, LCI, or was it City
It was
Plan?
LCI. It was through LCI, but it was a consulting group.
So you hired someone to door-to-door surveys, and what did you find out? That people wanted this stuff? I mean, what did you find out in the surveys? I mean, is this a product of some what you learned?
This was a product. Like, this is a continuation of that.
Mhm.
It was done through the Main Street initiatives, and that's where it was determined these were viable corridors that could actually become viable again with the right amount of attention, the right amount of development, the right amount of interest, community involvement, and it could become what we're trying to make it.
So, I mean, I'll just, unless Jonathan disagrees with me, we'll just put that issue off the table about whether you let the community talk, because you did let them talk. Or are we wrong about that, Jonathan?
Well, I would say that I think I've heard at least a lot of frustration from certain advocacy groups in the city about the process of zoning, and I feel for the city officials who've been working on this project, putting a lot of effort into it, reaching out to business owners, property owners, residents, doing surveys, and trying to incorporate as much feedback as possible. And yet there still seems to be a pushback. I'm not sure how large the groups are that are
Loud.
pushing back, but
It's loud.
it's perhaps quite loud. But there's also part of me that feels like there's an underlying issue that's maybe not being addressed, and it's not been addressed for decades in,
And what's
in
that
the
issue?
city. The legacy of modern planning in New Haven is maybe the most concise way of saying it. I think it's a great thing to kind of try to do planning in a different way than it's been done in the past, trying to incorporate more voices and more feedback from the public, trying to address issues that they're interested in. And then there's another piece that, well, perhaps we need to look back a little bit to see the impact of some of the decisions that were made during urban renewal.
Well, you had a great exhibit about that at the Yale Architecture School about what happened with Church Street South. So here's what I'm wondering. I kind of took that assumption, Jonathan. I wrote an article last week about how do you define community. And I wrote in it that we're all operating under this assumption that we did all this massive planning and remaking our city in the 1950s and 60s more than any other city per capita in the country. And in the end, everyone kind of feels like we did it wrong for the most part, with a lot of good stuff maybe intended that didn't get finished. But overall, especially the basic idea of tearing down so much historic architecture and going to this sort of design for the car and everything. At the time, the officials felt they had reached out to the community and heard the community. And I wrote the consensus is that they really didn't hear enough from people, and that's why it went wrong. One of our commenters, 1644, wrote, Dick Lee, the mayor, kept getting reelected by a lot of margin, except for when he wanted to do busing in schools. And then he hit out and just barely got in. But otherwise, 16 years, this was his number one program, and people voted for it. So it made me re-examine if I'm right that that's the real story. And I'm wondering sometimes if when you do a lot of public participation, in the end, somebody wins and somebody loses. If not everyone agrees, then a lot of people will be for something and some people will be against it. And sometimes when that side loses, then they keep saying it's about process. Like we're in a relationship and you're arguing for a long time about arguing, and you realize you're not really arguing about arguing, you're arguing about what the thing you were arguing about, you didn't like the result. Is that kind of what we're happening? If you have 9 public hearings, like I remember at Route 34 West, there were people very strongly, including Jonathan, and I happen to agree with them. There were mistakes in how that was done. But they had like 9 public hearings. On a Sunday, city officials spent 5 hours listening to everyone talk as long as they wanted to talk. And in the end, the argument was you didn't listen to the public. And that happened with the Webster Bank building. Hearing after hearing delayed for a year while they had all these people coming making their case over and over who didn't want it knocked down. And they might have been right. But in the end, it was very public, very democratic, and they decided it's going to come down. And the argument then said, wait, you haven't heard the public. Do you think, Jonathan, it might not be the issue is public participation and the wisdom of the crowd?
I mean, I can't speak for anyone else, but I'd say that I get the impression that some people who have been pretty active or vocally against some of the work that's been done on the commercial corridors, I think I get the impression that they would like to sit down with city officials and sort of tell them what they want the city officials to provide to them and their interest group. And that's not really the way that zoning or planning works. That's not what zoning can accomplish in the city. But I think there's an underlying issue that is maybe difficult for many people to articulate. And for me, that issue is that Dixwell, Worcester Square, Whaley Avenue at one point were places where working class people could get a piece of property, build a business, build a house, build intergenerational wealth by providing their community with goods and services or housing themselves. And increasingly, that's becoming very difficult, partially just because of the price of land, the regulatory barriers that are in place. And so people who generations ago could have been the developers of their neighborhood are no longer.
Although we see it with immigrants, like I'm thinking of the coffee shop at Cafe Fuel. I'm thinking
absolutely.
of the body shop on Whaley by the prison. But this is a really good point, and this is a point we're talking about neighborhood commercial rezoning with Aisha Woods, Arlevia Samuel, and Jonathan Hopkins. So let me ask you, Aisha and Arlevia, on the proposal. So we're all agreeing that the goal is so we're not talking about the big developer. That as Jonathan said, a working or middle class person can get a piece of property, build a store and a home or a combination, and that you want to make that easier. Right? By doing this.
I think that's a major goal. I also want to say that for the larger affordable housing developments, it really requires a certain level of density and a certain number of units to make the money work, to make the financing work to provide affordable housing. So that is, we've also been working, with affordable housing developers to make sure that this is, again, an enabling type of
so let's get the specifics. They argued about process at this hearing, and I guess I kind of had Arlevia's reaction to that one. But let's go to the merits rather than whether you're arguing about arguing. Affordable housing. So what we heard last week at the hearing was, well, you guys just going to do gentrification. You're going to bring in, and you're saying your goal is the exact opposite. You'd put affordable housing. And they said, well, then why not require 25% of a project to be affordable housing rather than 10? And I think what I'm hearing from you is that you got to make sure the dollars work, so you could have incentives that if you do 25%, you do better. And I do want to follow that further, but do you two want to weigh in on that at all?
I think by and large, there are a shared set of goals. Like
Mm-hmm.
our goals are to, bring back some vibrancy to these neighborhoods that have really been left behind in the kind of renaissance of downtown.
Mm-hmm.
The growth and prosperity of what we're seeing downtown has not been shared in the neighborhood. So
Mhm.
part of the goal is to bring some of that vibrancy out to the neighborhoods, um, and but to do it in a way that benefits the neighborhoods and doesn't. We're really not interested in displacement.
Right.
And this is all. It's very. I mean, we've really actually, worked with some of the opponents to this quite closely and incorporated some of their specific feedback into this. So I would say the community process in this has been very helpful to us too, because we've been kind of testing the actual regulations, and we've had them posted for quite a while, and we've sent them out to people to provide feedback and red lines. And they're still out there on the website. So anybody is welcome to send us suggestions. And we've been
Oh, good. And then how do they do that?
They can either email them directly to city staff, or they can. There's also a portal on the website that is www.newhavencorridors.com,
Mhm.
and there is a like a comment box, so somebody can, if they just have a short comment, they can certainly.
Let me throw this
Enter it
all
there.
upside down, okay?
Okay.
And this is not my opinion, because I'm not a city planning expert.
Okay.
I honestly am not saying this is what I think, but I'm also not saying this is not what I don't think. Okay. I love the comment section of the Independent, because there are people like Jonathan who know so much more than we do, have studied all this stuff, and they always say, "Wait a second, you guys might be totally wrong about this." So there's a guy named Mark Abraham, right, from Data Haven, and his argument over and over, and we're hearing it also in California with the rent control debate, is that when people say we want affordable housing and they come to you when you're doing this project and say, make it 25% rather than 10, or else you're kicking people out and you're not creating affordable housing. His argument is that you get more affordable housing if you don't require the number, because these people are building on vacant land. So they're not throwing anybody out. So if they create 20 apartments, hopefully some of them might be affordable, but if they're not, you're building the tax base, you're creating more supply, and here's where economics come in way above my pay grade. Other rents go down. That if you have vacant land, like in New Haven, with the exception of Duncan Hotel, which was like 9 people and they were living illegally in a fire trap, and they found them other places a block away. Outside of that, there has not been displacement. Gentrification narrowly has meant some guy comes in, he can see the artist came in first, now the yuppies, so let's kick everybody out by turning off the heat in the middle of winter, and then they get out, and then we jack up the rent, and some richer people come in. In New Haven, we've been building on vacant land. So the new housing that comes in, everyone says, I don't want my taxes raised. We get taxes. And according to people like Mark Abraham, they believe that when the market works, you get more affordable housing because other rents go down, which I don't know if that's true or not. And some of these projects you can negotiate to have some affordable in. So there's more affordable housing, more housing. Is that right, Jonathan? Do the opponents wrong when they say beat up Aisha and they beat up Levia and say, we want 25% and you're doing gentrification and kicking out all the poor people?
I mean, it's a very complicated issue, and New Haven is not California. As far as the 25% versus 10% requirement, there's a reality of real estate finance. You have to get high enough rents that can offset the affordable housing units, right. And I'm not convinced that you can necessarily get the high enough rents in the corridors like Whaley, Dixwell, and Grand that would then offset the affordable units. I think 10% is going to be really tough. 25%, why not?
But there's a confidence
100%?
of the people who require more that you can actually make it happen then. Whereas the people like Mark Abraham argue, in the end, if you do it, you're not going to get any affordable housing because no one's going to be able to build it. We're not going to get, Donald Trump's not going to send us a lot of money to build a lot of new Quinnipiac terraces.
I mean, there's certainly kind of a feel-good portion of the inclusionary zoning that it's, I think ideally you might get a few dozen affordable units out of that. And I sometimes agree with Mark that that just letting developers build as much as possible will retain some of the existing housing stock as more affordable. there is
That could
a
be wrong,
little
could be
bit of-
right. That's a little bit
there's
leap
a
of
little
faith.
bit of evidence of that. It's next to some of the new buildings, like Corsair, for instance. The rents in the blocks immediately adjacent to Corsair in the Goatville neighborhood have sort of stabilized or even gone down a little bit in recent years, and that seems to maybe be in relation to the investment. So it's
The
I
whole
think there.
supply, yeah. But let me throw out some other ideas and tell me about this. So instead of that, the one proposal has been to make it easier, because I like a lot of that room for all stuff. The coalition's plan, you could make it easier to put mother-in-law apartments, like build on existing house a smaller unit, and that's a way to like maximize property and get affordable housing. Some people talk about micro units. Some people think we don't want people living next to small spaces. Are there other ways, Aisha, to get affordable housing separate from just requiring it in possibly unfinanceable projects?
I think that's a really important point, and this is this particular proposal is very narrowly focused on the commercial corridors themselves, but it's really the neighborhoods we have to look at, and LCI has been really spearheading some of the efforts to stabilize affordable housing in the neighborhoods. That's where our naturally occurring affordable housing is, and we want to make sure that people don't get priced out of their their homes in our fabric, which is the 2-3 family homes. We really
Yeah,
that's
the
really
beautiful, the
like
great New Haven homes.
yeah, that's what makes New Haven. So our interest is really in protecting those areas.
And Arlene, are you involved in that at all with the housing, or you focus more on commercial, or are you trying to combine the commercial with the housing?
Well, my entire career is housing
Okay.
up till now. So I'm focused on both right now. And it's part of what you were saying with the supply and demand. It does make a difference with housing. I've been in it for over 20 years. You increase the supply of housing, the rents are going to stabilize. They're going to go down. You can't bring these high, expensive new units in and expect people to move into them when they have units around them that they can afford. So it's going to be a hard time leasing if it's all market rate. So you have to lower your rent so that you can fill the units. When it comes to the affordability component, you ask a developer for 10%, it's doable. 25, it's doable, but it's hard. And that's when you're talking about a developer coming back asking for subsidies. We don't have any subsidies.
So are you of the mind, based on your experience, that like if Randy Salvador he have 10% in the hill where he's building, that was doable, and that although he got some subsidies for the housing,
Well, the
but
state,
that
I
other
think,
rents
paid
are gonna
him like $1.5 million
to build those
yeah.
affordable.
It was like,
So is your feeling, Arlevia, that if I heard you right, that based on your experience, that if we let just people build, even if it's market rate, other rents will go down, that will be more affordable housing, and the important thing is to get more affordable housing, not which unit it is?
It's the more units you have available, the lower the rents are going to be. Because you're not going to get an influx like we built 800 units in Dixwell. 1,200 people aren't going to come looking for those units because they just built new units in Dixwell. It's gonna their units already there. Your units available. You can't come in asking for a crazy high rent and think you're going to get it. And we're also not looking to bring in any 100% market rate developments. Period.
So you talked about 20 year. Where have you done this work elsewhere?
I've been at New Haven Housing Authority.
Oh, okay.
Stanford Housing Authority, Bridgeport Housing Authority, Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, Navarino Property Management, and related.
And so what's your takeaway? That's one of your takeaways. What's your takeaway about I mean, this all factors in that experience you had over 20 years to how you're promoting this idea about how to redo the zoning, correct?
Okay, first disclaimer, I'm not zoning.
No, but you're pushing the rezoning plan.
Correct, but it's a part of rebuilding the neighborhood. Why should every neighborhood in the city of New Haven get love, get money, get development, get improvements, except for Dixwell? Dixwell has been untouched for over 20 years. Why shouldn't it get new developments? Why shouldn't it get new amenities? Why shouldn't the community buy some property and open up their own business and be a viable part of their community? That should be an option. Yeah,
now I would say in Dixwell things are starting to change, right? See, Dixwell Plaza, there's a plan on the table. You got the artist housing project. You have the Munson Street development. You have the Beulah Heights at the old Joe Greats, right?
Correct.
So we're starting to see some movement in Dixwell.
Yes.
I mean, my theory is that that's the neighborhood's going to show the most difference 5 years from now if we don't have a major recession.
That's the hope.
All right. All right. So let me ask you how you picked these three neighborhoods. I get the idea about Dixwell. No one's invested there a long time. How did you pick Lower Grand, that's what it's called, or Upper Grand, the part that's nearest to downtown before you get to the what used to be called Farnham Courts, now Mill River? And how did you pick Whaley Avenue?
I would
We-
say I would say both of those in this recent. I'm just speaking for more the specific zoning exercise, and Olivia can speak to the longer range Main Streets plan. But we were specifically asked for Lower Grand by the alder at that time. Please come. Let's have a community meeting. We need to fix this zoning so that there can be development here. Likewise on Whaley, it was really a request from the community. The Whaley zoning has been, it's so awkward because it was created
For car
for
businesses.
car
right?
businesses.
Yeah, that's so,
So
weird.
it's really hampered, projects like the St. Luke's mixed
Mhm.
use housing and commercial projects. So both of those were really a response, like, come on already, let's fix this. And we thought it would be, it's something that we can do on a technical basis, and it doesn't it requires staff time, it requires a lot of work and research and outreach, but it's something where we can affect change without actually building something.
Mhm.
We don't have the money to do like a big development as the city. So
You want to let loose the power of the
yeah.
market.
And then, on the Dixwell side, it was, there are these, really interesting developments in the wings, the Dixwell Plaza and Beulah Land. And so we wanted to get ahead of those and enable those developments in particular, but also bring some revitalization to the corridor.
Jonathan, did you write the book with the old pictures of Dixwell? Of what it used to look like before?
No, that was
Riverville?
Colin Kaplan. I
Yeah,
think you're
that blew me
thinking of.
away when you see all the stores there, and then you say brought back what was there. So I think we're not going to see the little movie theater. I could be wrong. You might not see the
That's
candy
fabulous.
store.
Edge of the Woods used to be a theater too.
Yeah,
But there's a lot of
the
neighborhood
Agora
theater.
ballroom too.
But
Yeah.
I'll jump in real quick and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding also of the commercial gateways districts is that it's kind of an outgrowth of a kind of 10 years long rezoning effort of all the business districts in the city. I think it started in 2010 with the Grand Avenue Village District, BA1, sort of the zoning there was recreated or rewritten. The BD3 zone was created in 2012. In 2013, there was a map amendment in the Dwight neighborhood to allow the novella to be built. The BD1 was extended up there. In 2017, the BD, the Central Business District, kind of downtown, that text was rewritten to allow denser development with less parking. In 2018, a IH zone was changed to high density multifamily at 201 Munson Street. The BA2 Westville Village District was created in 2018 also. In 2019, now we're working on the gateway corridors. And to me, it seems like this is
Gotcha.
just a continuation.
So how do you
of,
feel about this whole project?
Um,
Would you vote if it were up to you on the board, all those? How would you cast your vote?
I'm still struggling a little bit with the process. Part of me just kind of wants to get it out of the way so that we can really focus on the residential neighborhoods, but I still also have a few concerns about the focus on the business districts and the general business Whaley, Dixwell.
Well, they're talking about making those
too.
residential too, right?
Including residential ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess my interest in the residential neighborhoods is primarily that's where most residents live and own property. And to me, when you look at the sections of Whaley, Dixwell, and Grand that are going to be rezoned, there's approximately 250 properties there. About a quarter of them are kind of owner occupied, meaning that's where the church who owns the land is located. That's where the funeral home that owns the land is located. There's a few homeowners in the corridors, and then there's some locally owned businesses that own the building where they're located. That's about 25%
Mhm.
of the properties. The other 75% are kind of investment properties. They're registered LLCs.
Yeah. We got to blow those
they're-
people's cover.
Yeah, and then in addition to that, another way to look at it is 2/3 of the properties are owned by New Haven entities, either people, businesses, or corporations registered in New Haven, and about a third are out of town owners or out of state owners. And when you look at the developable land, it's not really the churches or funeral homes or owner occupied houses. It's the kind of underused commercial or parking lots that are typically owned as investment properties.
I'm thinking of
a
Winthrop
lot of
and
them by
Whaley, which has been
out-of-town
empty so
owners.
long. But anyway, so is it either or? Why? Because I mean, like LCI's building houses and like up in the Heights and stuff. They have different divisions. Changing a zoning code, is that comes at the expense if you're changing a commercial zoning code and trying to add residential? Is that coming at the expense, in your opinion, of developing residential areas of a neighborhood?
Well, I mean, the city has limited resources that they can put into certain things. That's definitely true for the city plan department. So, yes, if we could do everything at once, that'd be great. But choices have to be made, and I sort of wonder why there's been so much focus on the business districts. 250 properties in the Whaley Edgewood, or sorry, Whaley Dixwell Grand Avenue area. There's 10,000 homeowners in the city. So that's one of the things that I've struggled to understand.
Any
I
thoughts on
appreciate
your Asian?
This is quote unquote a pilot, so it can't incorporate the entire city in a pilot. These corridors need the attention. These are the commercial corridors of New Haven. So we're doing something commercially focused, and we're doing rezoning to assist in the development of commercial and residential. These would be the prime corridors to make that happen.
Jaywan Carter writes in, thanks for listening, Jaywan. I love when you pipe in here. How do we create a development for Dixwell when the average neighborhood annual income is $25,000? Keep in mind we need better employment opportunities and contractors to increase their capacity to become 8A certified. We need some plan to include collective reciprocity. So you guys are in with the secret lingo. I have no idea what 8A is. I have no idea what collective reciprocity. You want to like translate and weigh in, anybody? And thank you very much, Jaywan.
What was the first part of his question?
How do we create development when the average neighborhood income is $25K? Keep in mind we need better employment opportunities and contractors to increase their capacity to become 8A certified, and we need plan to conclude with collective reciprocity.
If one of his points is that it's very difficult for someone of low income to participate in this sort of market boom of rental housing that we've seen in the city, I totally sympathize with that. It's and I'm not totally sure that the regulations that are being created in the commercial corridors district are going to alleviate the complexity of building in the neighborhood. It's with all the incentives, it's a difficult document to get through, even someone who's well versed in planning. So I share his concern.
I guess the city has the
correctly.
Dixwell Avenue Training Center, and they're trying to get, when
The
there's government
Opportunity
work,
Center.
getting subs in on jobs. Like one sub was telling me he got a job for clearing some of the Munson area, and he said he learned how to do something new to get the stumps out. He said that's the way that those opportunities are created. So now maybe he could do something if they have to pull a stump out somewhere else, but it's not a government project. I don't know. It's a good question. Any final words from anybody? I promised there's some people have noon meetings.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for having us on. This has been really an exciting process. It's really kind of democracy in action, I think.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a small start to a much bigger look at, how can we actually, implement some of these things citywide? How can we actually allow growth to happen in a way that benefits the city of New Haven or the people who live here already? Again, thank you so much for having us. We look forward to, further discussion about this.
There's a
'cause
vote
it's
coming
so
up, right?
important.
Oh, the Alderman committee has to do
So
it.
currently, it's still in public hearing. So we're still taking testimony. We're taking if the best way to do that is to write a letter or to provide us with.
And we'll put a link when we do a story about this to
Yeah.
your corridors. And Anika Singh Lamar says, I suspect Aisha and Arlevia can confirm or deny that part of the reason to focus on commercial is that when the city and Connecticut Main Streets asked people what they want for the neighborhood, they said they want retail and restaurants and other amenities that go in commercial corridors, not the residential portion. Of course, increasing housing density is a necessary piece to making that retail viable, as we found out in Westville Village. You need a lot more people than you think to keep that restaurant open or that store. Good
Yeah,
points
that's
all.
true.
Arlevia, any final thoughts?
I wouldn't say they didn't want residential as well, but the
Mhm.
rest of that is pretty accurate.
All right.
I think it's important. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to point out, you think when you're bringing in new developments, you're bringing in new commercial businesses, that's jobs. The construction part is jobs. Once the businesses are there, people have to work. So there are jobs coming as well. It's not just throwing up a new development, bringing us in new apartments. It's bringing in new homes, bringing in new people to the community, putting in amenities that people from outside the community want to come in and utilize as well. And you have jobs. So it's increased income for the households as well.
John, do you have a final thought?
Yeah, I think it's really important to try to provide goods and services to residents and encourage people to provide that. I think one thing that we often romanticize how Whaley used to be, how Dixwell used to be. And one of the things that it seems like we forget is that in addition to there being grocery stores and pharmacies and doctors' offices, to me, the more important point is that the money that was spent in those places stayed in the neighborhood.
Right, you always
because they
bring
were
up, I love when you
locally
bring
owned.
this
The
up, about
property
all the
was locally
capital
owned.
that's owned from far
Yeah.
afield and taken out of our community.
And so that's sort of that's maybe the central point of my concern with the focus on the commercial corridors, where a significant portion of the developable land is owned by out-of-town investors or owned specifically as investment properties, and the benefits of redeveloping those sites, I think a lot of that is going to go out of town, unfortunately. And so that's sort of
Well, the argument I heard from our other guests is that the point of this is so that the local person who can't afford the lawyer to get a zoning variance can also get a shot, right?
right. But then the point I was trying to make was that of the 250 properties
Oh.
in these districts, a significant portion of the developable ones are owned as
by-
investments. They're investor-owned properties.
All right, I think we have a good follow-up show on that. All right, so thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks to today's guests, Aisha Woods, Arlevia Samuel, and Jonathan Hopkins. Thanks to the miracle man behind the controls, WNHH station manager Harry Droz, and thanks to Inland Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night long here at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.